caught a little bit of the Frank Hassel versus Boogie showdown. And it was interesting. I found myself asking question, who was being more Christian? I don't know what either of their professed beliefs are, but who is being more Christian? Because from like a pagan perspective or an anti-Christian perspective, it could be said obviously that Frank was being active, he was being aggressive, he's being assertive. You could even say he was being sadistic. He was trying to hurt Boogie. And Boogie was being passive and masochistic and like, all this sort of, when you have two wolves and one sort of rolls over and shows his belly. That's what Boogie was doing. He was like, oh, you want to hurt me? Well, actually, I would enjoy that. So I guess there's an anti-Christian perspective that says, well, I guess Boogie has to be the Christian, right? That's what Christians do. They love to be martyred. They love to be hurt. They love to be the submissive partner. And the pagan, he's the active man, the aggressive, assertive man of strength and power, etc., etc. But I was thinking about, what actually happens in the Bible. And like take the Samaritan woman, for example. She's in an inferior position. And she doesn't go to Christ and say, I'm actually better because I'm like ethnically mixed. I'm superior actually because of my identity crisis, or however you describe the situation of the Samaritans. I'm a lower-cased person essentially, therefore I'm superior, right? In Christianity. That's not how it's presented at all. It's actually, she's showing humility. She's showing a desire to be aligned and in harmony with the great order of things, the great hierarchies of the world. And she's saying, I don't want to be resentful. I don't want to be someone who says, oh, well, Jesus only came for the children of Israel, therefore I hate him and resent him because he doesn't let me in the cool kids club. She says, no, I recognize your authority. And even though, I might not deserve to be given this favor, this blessing, I'm going to, submit myself. And so what kind of submission is that? Is that a submission to the concept of weakness or the concept of strength? It's a submission to the concept of strength. Christ never comes to cripple people or blind people or make people sick or give people leprosy. He does the reverse. He takes people who are in a state of weakness and he restores them to a state of strength. So the actual actions of Christ, regardless of this, 20th century, 21st century revisionism where it's actually good to be weak, all the actions that Christ took were about strengthening people, making people stronger. He wanted people to be stronger in their mind, in their body, in their spirit. And he showed strength himself in all the things that he did, his fasting, his life's work, carrying the cross, right? All of that takes strength. So the idea that you're going to be defined by tragedies that happened in your past is one of the most unchristian things possible, what Boogie does. And again, we have this image in our minds, this popular conception, that a lot of Christians themselves, people will identify and they'll say, well, actually, someone who is weak is more Christian than someone who's strong. Someone who is, or they'll say things like, Jesus loves you for who you are. He accepts you for who you are. That's not true at all, right? Jesus did not accept the condition of sickness and weakness and sin. He didn't accept that at all. He did not accept people for who they were. He wanted to change them. He explicitly said, my mission here is to change people. I don't want to accept them for who they are. I don't want them as they are. I want them to completely change, to totally let go of the past, to let the dead bury the dead, and to move forward into a new identity, to have a new heart, to have a new nature, to have a new spirit. Not to accept who they were, not to tolerate who they were, not to love them for who they were, but to change them so that they're aligned with the will of the Father, with Logos, with love, with what love really means, because today we have this conception of love, that love equals tolerance, it equals acceptance, it equals liking somebody, it equals giving somebody whatever they want, So our modern conception of love is, if you love a child, you have children, and you say, oh, I love my son, I love my daughter, so what do they want? I'm just going to give them whatever they want. Well, then your children are going to become weak, right? They're going to be eating the wrong foods. They're going to be lazy. They're just going to be engaging in hedonism. They're not going to be strong. And so, if your child says, I like to, hurt myself, or I like to, do things that are bad for myself, you have to say, well, I just accept you for who you are and I tolerate your behavior. That is not Christian. If we try to read the Bible without the revisionism that's come in, and we just look at it, we see a lot of Old Testament prophets, and Jesus is just carrying on that tradition of just condemning an entire nation of people and just saying, you guys have it completely wrong. God does not accept this. He does not tolerate it. There are going to be consequences. You people are weak. You're not strong. You're not strong in your faith. You're not using your common sense. You're not being intelligent. You're weak-willed. You're undisciplined. And all of that was attacked. All of that was not accepted. And it's not to say that there aren't inherent weaknesses in the various conditions of individuals. If you are someone who is physically weak or physically impaired, barring miracles or expensive medical procedures, in many cases, you're just going to have to deal with that. But it doesn't mean embracing that. It doesn't mean saying, oh, well, actually, my physical impairment is a strength. When the Bible takes physical impairments and it allows people to succeed in spite of them, that's not supposed to be a celebration of physical impairments. It's supposed to be a celebration of God who can accomplish things through weak people. That's what it's supposed to be a celebration of. But what the secularization of Christianity has done is it's removed God from the picture, and the human-centric perspective says, okay, well, here, David is celebrated because he's shorter than the giant Goliath, and therefore I guess it's good to be short and it's bad to be tall. That's not what the story is saying at all. The story is saying that, because David had the Logos, because he had knowledge, because he had wisdom, because he had faith, he had all these things. All those things were able to overcome the apparent strength of Goliath, who actually was dumb, and he probably wasn't that smart, and he didn't have faith. He didn't have all those things. So it's, Christianity is not actually, from a biblical perspective, it's not really telling people to be weak, to dwell in their weakness, to dwell in the past, to dwell in abuse, to dwell in bad things. It's not telling people to self-define by those bad things that happened to you in the past. It's one thing maybe to bring those things to light and to understand, to say, okay, well, here we have a man who's in a very bad psychological condition, very low self-worth, very low self-esteem. We can analyze people. We can go to the worst cases. Serial killers are the most, it's like if someone's a serial killer, we know something's gone wrong in their life. We know it's not just an accident. We know it's not just like a mistake. There are some people where they'll get in a drunk driving accident and they'll be like, oh, I never drank and drive before. When you're a serial killer, it's kind of like there's been a lifetime of evil that's led up to that. It's not some kind of spontaneous whoops, had one too many and then accidentally got in an accident. There are tragedies that are quite spontaneous and quite uncontrollable, but when you have something that's premeditated and repetitive and very sadistic like that, we have to look into what leads to that. We have to understand, okay, we understand now the importance of loving parents, because when you don't have that, that's a contributing factor. We understand the importance of teaching kindness to small animals, because if you don't have that, if you have abuse of small animals, that's a contributing factor. So we can kind of run down all the list and look at these contributing factors. We can understand that. We can understand how important it is that we have these good structures and a good socialization for people. But it doesn't mean that you then, accept that and dwell in it and tolerate it and say, well, there's really no bad guys here. And in fact, we valorize it, right? We have Dexter, and we valorize it. We say it's actually cool. You actually should be like that. And this is a very feminine perspective. Men can do it as well. But fundamentally, this worship of the serial killer as a misunderstood individual. Well, if they only understood the bad things that happened, then they would understand how he's actually a really good guy at heart. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what bad. Like, again, we can understand those things. We can understand contributing factors, and we can try to avoid perpetuating those bad things into the future. But to dwell in them and to, it's like, Lucifer, when he is, he feels he's betrayed by God because of how humanity is raised up above him. And so he says, well, I had to do what I did. I had to trick them in the garden. I had to do this. I had to do that. I have to be who I am, because look at what happened to me. It was the greatest betrayal of all time. And so it becomes a justification. It becomes a justification. Look at these bad things that happened, and therefore it becomes a perpetuation of future cycles of negativity, abuse, manipulation. And what Frank does is he just lays it all out there. And, maybe it's sacrilegious to call him a biblical prophet, but when he just lays into somebody and he says, you're going to pretend to be this weak little snake. You're going to pretend to be this weak little worm on your belly with no arms, no legs. I can't defend myself. He just kind of lays in. Not saying that that's the best way to do it, or that's the way I would do it. But compare that kind of behavior to an internet professional, someone who's been on the internet for 10 plus years, millions of views, content creator, has been in the news, has been all around. He knows how things work. He's an intelligent guy. He manipulates, he lies, and then he creates these, or he gets confused when he tells these stories of abuse. It's like, was that a false memory? Was that a real memory? And again, we can understand objectively that abuse messes people up. It puts them in a state of confusion. It puts them in a state of weakness. And if it's not addressed, if it's not fought against, that kind of influence can perpetuate, right? People can want to recreate abuse. But dwelling in that abuse is not the way to overcome it. And dwelling in that abuse is not helping anybody. Constantly bringing it up, as a defense mechanism. Oh, well, I'm probably like this because I was abused. Everyone has been on the receiving end of some kind of injustice or unfairness or whatever. I mean, if you haven't, I guess you've lived some kind of or you've been given some kind of silver spoon. But most people have had things that, someone's having a bad day and they give you a bad look or they yell at you. And this escalates all the way to, you're born into a situation where it's some kind of systematic abuse. If you're constantly referencing that and constantly living in that and reliving in that and thinking about it and, and you're almost normalizing it, right? And you're normalizing, I think that is a kind of, think of Satan, and he's saying, yeah, I was betrayed, and that justifies everything I do. I didn't do that. It wasn't my choice, right? So the locus of agency is placed in the betrayal and the bad thing. Oh, well, I was abused. I can't change that. I can't change the past. That's what made me who I am. I don't have the agency to change that. I can't go back and prevent that negative thing. Therefore, I just have to live it out. I just have to be completely controlled by the injustice against me. I just have to be the subsequent unfolding of that injustice. I can never have an intercession, right? I can never have a cleansing. I can never have a catharsis. I can never have a renewal. I can never leave those things behind. I can never move beyond those things. I can never be cleaned of those things. I've always got this dirty stain on me. Why bother cleaning it? Why not just roll around in the dirt, in the mud? So, Christianity says, don't dwell on those things. Don't stick with those things. Don't be trapped in the past. You can learn from the past. You can learn from history. You can learn scripture. You can learn all that stuff. But if you're stuck in the past and you're telling yourself things and you're creating narratives, you're saying things like, I am who I am and I can't change. That's true to the extent that you believe it. And it's good to have a stable identity if that stable identity is helping you grow and move forward and mature. If it's providing you a foundation, I know who I am, I have these good values, I have these good people around me, these are, this is where I come from, this is my story, this is my history. If that's all building you up and giving you ideals of who you should be, and say, I was raised to be an honest person. That's my self-definition. And therefore, even when it's tough to be honest, I'm going to do the right thing because that's who I am. If you're defining yourself in that way, that's good. And so self-definition can be good. It's not to say that, the ideal society is filled with people who are, nameless and sort of living as animals or something. It's good to have this kind of self-reflection, self-definition, if it is helping you. But the moment your identity becomes something negative, the moment your identity is holding you back, when you self-identify in a way that says, I'm a victim of abuse, I'm a victim of injustice, I'm a weak person, I can't do this because, I cannot become fit because I'm a weak person, I cannot, whatever kind of goal, I can't be moral, I am an immoral person. Whatever the self-definition is, if it is tending toward the negative side, then you might as well wipe the whole thing clean, right? What is the point of having an identity if that identity is making you live a life of suffering and ultimately hell? And the Bible says if your eye is a stumbling block for you, you pluck it out. If your hand is causing you to sin, you chop it off. I mean, it's that serious. Now, those things are of the body. Of course, our eyes and our hands don't condition our thoughts, our feelings, and our identity. Our eyes and our hands are symbolic representations of the way that our identity is supposed to be a tool that we use to grow. It's not supposed to be a prison that causes us to be stuck in despair and suffering and hell and hedonism. It's supposed to be a stable foundation that allows us to build and grow. And the moment that it stops being that, we should cut it out. We should cut it off. We should destroy it. We should obliterate it. We should let go of it. So, a lot of metaphors are used in the Bible. Your eyeball has no perceptual ability. It has no ability to look at things and to desire them or to lust after them or to judge them or to criticize them. The eye is a window. It's the brain that interprets what you see and makes decisions thereof. The same with the hand. The hand doesn't interpret anything. It gives you sensory data, but you decide what to make of that. And so really, the Bible doesn't have it doesn't use the literal terms like identity or something. It's always referencing that with the eye and the hand. I mean, if you're a person who's stuck in despair and a negative self-definition, you can mutilate your body. You can become blind and crippled and handless, but it's not going to provide you relief. It's not going to, because those things were just an extension of yourself. That's just a way that you acted out your internal feelings through these tools of the body. So getting rid of the body is not going to solve the ultimate problem, which is in the soul. So you have to get rid of those things that have attached to your soul that are holding you back. Because, again, having a stable identity is great if it's helping you grow, but if it's not, there's no purpose to it. And so that's the point at which you have to just come to a point where you're willing to surrender that identity. You're willing to say, whoever I am, whatever I am, whatever other people have told me I am, whatever I've told myself I am, if it's not serving me, if it's not serving God, if it's not serving love, if it's not serving growth, if it's not making the world a better place, if it's a hedonic prison, if it's a prison of misery and despair and a poor self-definition and all of that, then there is no reason to keep it around. There's no reason to be attached to it. There's no reason to be loyal to it. And we are fearful of death, right? So the biblical paraphrase is, if you try to save your life, you're going to lose your life. If you lose your life, you'll save your life. And what that's meaning is when we talk about the life, it's not just the physical, biological breathing and beating of the heart and the pumping of the blood and the lungs. It is our life narrative, our life history. And so sometimes we're so attached to our life narrative and our life history that we believe that it somehow, even the negative parts have value, right? In the same way you're reading a novel or something, and the novel just wouldn't be as good without the villain, right? Every Mario needs a Bowser. Every Beowulf needs a Grendel. Or no, I guess his name's Siegfried. I always mix that up. Siegfried needs a Grendel. Anyway, the hero always needs a villain counterpart to draw out the hero, right? But understand there that the hero is supposed to embody personal growth toward goodness, toward good ideals, toward strength. The villain is the stumbling block. This villain is the obstacle that the hero overcomes. And so that is necessary in the world, that's necessary in a narrative, but within a person, sometimes people become so solipsistic and narcissistic through our, introverted, selfish culture and our navel-gazing culture that we want to look inward, and we start we create an internal narrative of ourselves that, oh, well, I've got the heroic part of myself and the villain part of myself, and we become attached to that, and we say, well, I wouldn't be as interesting if I didn't have that evil villain part. I need to be a complex character because that's, everything has shades of gray. And that's what makes me interesting and unique is that I'm complex, I have goodness and darkness. It's that dark triad, that the girls really like. And the girls really do like it. That doesn't make it good. In fact, that's probably a reason why you should avoid that, right? If, what do girls like? Serial killers, Machiavellian personality, narcissistic personality. When we can understand, maybe we could try to understand why that is, how that comes to be. But, that's shouldn't be the moral compass, right? So this is a narrative that people create is that, well, I am who I am because I have my dark side and my light side. I don't want to let go of my dark side because then I would lose myself. And in a sense, I would die, right? The interesting tug of war going on inside me, it would die. It would no longer be interesting. It would no longer be this complex character development. So I have to hold on to those negative parts of me because that's who I am, and I'm afraid of what would happen. I would be a boring person, or I wouldn't be able to manipulate people as well, or I wouldn't be able to self-pity as much, or it's all these things that we become attached to in our identities that hold us back from being better people. And when I paraphrase to save your life is to lose, or to save your life is to lose your life is to save your life. It's a question of what is your life really? Is your life and your soul, is it a collection of quirky personality traits? Oh, I'm so crazy, I've had all these terrible things happen, and that's what makes me different from other people. And therefore, I have to be attached, and therefore, I have to prove how bad these things were by living out a constant pity party where I reinforce mental habits that justify every bad thing that I do or every kind of masochistic or sadistic thing I do, where it's well, I have to be an alcoholic, or I have to be weak, or I have to be anxious. I have to be fearful. Because if I wasn't, then that would downplay my trauma. I have to build up this trauma in my life as this big great dragon, so that I can feel heroic. I can be the anti-hero, right? I can't have a job because I'm too anxious, because my life has been too traumatic. I think we underestimate the amount of self-definition that's involved here. And of course, some of it is societal self-definition, right? We learn from society. So at the end of the day, to place all the blame on individuals for this process of self-definition, it actually comes from a larger culture, an intentionally constructed culture that wants people to be weak and teaches people through anti-heroics, things like, Harry Potter or whatever, teaches people to identify with their weakness and says, oh, well, you want to be the main character, right? You want to be a hero. So you should be complex, and you should be very, you should have a dark sort of weakness to you. Like, that makes you, if you're socially awkward, that somehow that makes you like a more mysterious and attractive. You can't just be Chad. You just can't be Chad King Frank Hassel. You have to be kind of like nebbish and nerdy and neurotic and afraid and anxious. Of course, the presentation, it's kind of like, not Vampire Diaries, what's the other one with Bella? The vampire movie, where it's like, oh, he's like a 10 out of 10 ripped athletic bodybuilder, but he's also like really socially awkward and dark and brooding, and he's had all this trauma in his life, and he's so heartbroken and everything. And that's what makes him attractive. And women are taught to seek after that kind of man, and men are taught to be like that kind of man, rather than saying, yeah, that's a bunch of nonsense. We don't need to self-define in that way. If that is our self-definition, it might be time to just blow that up with a bunch of dynamite and do whatever it takes to get there. Because if you're stuck in patterns that are sending you downhill, that are not bringing you into ascension, if you're stuck in those patterns, then yeah, maybe reevaluating your life would be disruptive. And actually, the younger you do it, the best day is today. The second best day is tomorrow. But if you're reevaluating your life, yeah, maybe that requires you blow up your situation, whatever that is. Maybe you need to take a break from your employment or your school or your family or friends or your location. Maybe you need to do something that's going to be very disruptive. But ultimately, a short-term disruption where you lose all the things you've built up some capital in your life, and you lose all that capital, guys, inflation is the law, right? Inflation and entropy. If you just hold on to assets, whatever they are, you hold on to your assets, but you are degrading in your potential to use those assets, because your ability to act assertively and aggressively and forthrightly and confidently is decreasing by the day. And so you're kind of like, I'm trying to think of the famous billionaire who at the end of his life had the big long fingernails. You know who I'm talking about, Leonardo DiCaprio played him in the movie. If you're going toward that, not to say you have $1 billion, but to say that we all have assets, and we're afraid that if we do a radical revision of our lives, we're going to lose everything that we have, that we'd rather keep the limited assets that we have and continue on the downward trend. Or even, you don't necessarily have to be on a purely downward trend, just to say you're not ascending as much as you could be. It would be better to go completely bankrupt, to lose everything, to go homeless, to live on the streets, but you are coming with a renewed sense of purpose. Then you're leaving all that baggage and trauma behind. You're leaving all that, and you're saying, I'm going to move forward. And it is so much easier to build yourself back up from the ground up, because life is not about the distance that you've traveled, but it's the velocity and it's the acceleration that you're moving forward with. And if your current trajectory is, I would rather keep my distance, even though I know my velocity and acceleration are decreasing, versus I'm going to go back to square one. I'm going to lose everything, all the material things that I have, but my velocity, my acceleration are going to increase. And sometimes it's increasing from a negative to a positive, right? You look at life and you say, where am I going to be in 5, 10, 20 years? You look at people like Boogie. Do you want to be Boogie? No, no one wants to be Boogie, right? So we're exposing that. We're thinking about that. We're asking ourselves, do we want to be Boogie? Okay, we don't want to be Boogie. Now, are we becoming more Boogie-like or less Boogie-like in our thoughts, in our deeds, in our actions? In what ways are we being Boogie-like? In what ways are we living in the past? In what ways are we playing the victim? In what ways are we trying to manipulate people and manipulate ourselves into these anti-heroics, I'm special, look at me, this kind of masochism? If we feel in any way that we're moving toward that, and again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be, you blow up your life over something small. But people really do create prisons that are very subtle, because it's built up almost pebble by pebble, brick by brick. Every day you're kind of sitting in your mental space, in your psychic field, and you're setting down a pebble and a pebble and a pebble become bricks and boulders, and all of a sudden, after years and years, you're surrounded by these big impenetrable walls that either are going to take a long time to break down, or it's just time to get a stick of dynamite and blow it all up. And yes, it's going to hurt, it's going to be loud, it's going to be disruptive, it's going to be painful, but in a sense, it might be better just to use the TNT and blow it up and take the hit and feel the pain, because if you're trapped inside that prison, you're just going to wither away, and you're going to become a psychic vampire that's going to drain energy from other people, and you're going to seek to bring other people down with you. And you're going to revel in your weakness, and you're going to encourage weakness in other people, and you're going to have to, yeah, you go, man. Yeah, let's be weak together. That is the kind of mentality you're going to promote. So it might just be better to kind of blow it up, and that can be a daily thing, that can be a practice, that can be a habit, that can be small. This can be an image in your head, or it can be something a little more serious than that, depending on your situation. But yeah, don't be Boogie. Death is pretty drastic, and birth is also pretty drastic. I mean, birth is a painful thing, right? Birth is a pretty incredible thing. So yeah, that's it. I could ramble more, as you know, but we'll stop it there. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.